26th?
20?
Yeah, I've left I think so. Could
Doesn't
be.
matter.
Close enough. We'll correct it if not.
We're in October.
Okay. So you were just saying, why not just start off just jumping into current events? So the latest
correct.
news thing was that this gentleman was arrested in
Oh yeah, the latest
Florida?
news thing was there's a suspect that's been arrested in Florida for sending out the pipe bomb letters that went to Eric Holder and the Clintons, and I think one went to Maxine Waters. And so they just found him, and he's a suspect still.
Yeah.
But they arrested him. They think he's the man that's responsible for all these threatening letters, which I thought was kind of interesting. I mean, I was trying to figure out how he chose his victims, but apparently they all seemed liberal.
Okay, yeah, and I saw actually before I sat down in here, I didn't hear about him being arrested, but I saw that they were looking at Kamala Harris's may have received something as well.
She did.
And what I found interesting yesterday, in terms of how this was framed, and I don't know, what the details, whether he was some, what seems like some angry person from the right wing who believes that, war is on now and everything is fair game. But I don't know, I guess I saw the governor of New York speaking, and I think I've heard the framing going on now, this repetition that a terrorist, he is a terrorist. He belongs to the terrorist class, and I guess that's it's pretty nasty and up to no good whatsoever. But I'm kind of, to me, it feels like it's, why not just one more mentally ill human being on the planet? We're always justifying some war on terror.
Right.
And
well,
I don't know.
It goes really along with the concept that everyone on the team should get a trophy. Which means you no longer can just single out an individual and say they're the person that's special and that's what caused the championship. And so it's difficult for us to point at someone in these times and say, this guy is just mentally ill, and we should just put him in a hospital or an institution somewhere. And because he can't articulate, if he could articulate his position, it'd be a totally different story for us. But obviously he can't articulate his position, or they won't let him articulate his position because he's just got arrested today. But we looked at those people that were targeted by him, so maybe he is mentally ill, but it's tough for us to just go ahead and say, oh, he's just crazy.
Well, it is tough for us to say, and particularly I think of, you want to go in so many different directions. Just for all of us, keeping our mental health together in the way that the world is now.
Right.
And at what level these fringe nuts who declare that war is on, and what level is that being encouraged by the flow of
get some
sense
stature.
of war, that we're at war now.
Right.
Civility is
Doesn't matter.
not to be,
Right.
that's for wimps.
And we shouldn't even ask people to be civil.
No.
Shouldn't ask for them to communicate, understand some cultural norms. We don't ask for that stuff anymore. Like I said, everyone on the team gets a trophy. Whether they got off the bench or didn't get off the bench, it just seems unfair if we don't give them a trophy. And I'm thinking, this is sort of one of those things where we can't call him a name. We can't just simply say, this man is out of his mind.
Yeah, I'm with you, but I'm thinking still that it is being used as this to reinforce the paradigm, which maybe it just shouldn't be denied, that we're in a world full of terrorists every which way we turn.
Right.
The dominant party right now Who is the dominant party? I guess in America, that's the question. Just because President Trump is in office, is he represent the dominant party, or is it, you know,
Stephen
the
Bessos?
90% of the media that, you know? But you know, people would. I mean, Kaczynski. Jump back to Kaczynski 20 or 30 years ago, when this psycho.
Right. But he had a manifesto.
Well, here, yeah, let's inform some people on history if we can remember. I don't even know when that was. That was the 70s or the 80s, the 70s maybe?
No, we got into the 80s by
the
that
80s
time.
by that?
Yeah, I think
so. Here was this guy who was sort of a rebel environmentalist almost, right?
Right.
He was angry at scientists. He was angry at, and he had this manifesto.
The government. He was angry at individuals not stepping up to accept some responsibilities for themselves, which is what forced him to say, I can straighten this out. I can deal with this. And here's my manifesto, and now I'm going to get out there.
Yeah. It was pretty horrible. Of course, he was successful in his, this guy. Maybe he was just doing it symbolic. Maybe he's just a complete idiot, or maybe he, I mean, or
We
maybe
don't know.
not. Maybe he was. Maybe he. What?
Would we
don't
test
know.
him? Would we test him? I mean, they're probably going to do a series of mental tests on him. We probably won't hear necessarily what the outcome of that is going to be, and then we'll figure out whether he gets convicted or is not convicted, and then we're going to lose track of him because he's yesterday's news. Kaczynski, yesterday's news. The differentiation between the two, we've already determined. One of them was an intellectual of sorts, with an education of sorts, and wrote a manifesto. Said, here's what I believe. That's sort of Karl Marx-like.
It is, and in fact, I can remember a few friends of mine, or I don't know, maybe one or two, who had to go get that manifesto. They felt obliged, and you know what? He really had some really strong and great points that some of my, some I knew, and personally, I was like, no, thank you. I don't need to read his great points. I mean, to me, it's like the great points of the universe are out there. I don't care if this guy is an intellectual genius or not. As a matter of fact, I don't even want to. If he is an intellectual genius, I don't need his intellectual genius. You know, when you're out there killing people, and then you're going to. Is intellectual genius available for?
All of us can
in a
do
democratic
this,
tradition, available for lots of human beings.
Earlier this week, I picked up a magazine called Freedom Magazine.
Yeah.
I'd never seen it before in life.
Yeah.
You know, and it's all the articles were focused on opioid addiction, and specifically dealt with West Virginia. And grandparents now becoming parents because the parents have died as a result of the
tragedy.
And who's shipping out the drugs, and pharmaceutical makers can't sell direct, so they put them through distributors, and distributors then will mail out hundreds of thousands of these pills.
Now, are you reading something that's fresh news, or is this from 5 or 6 years ago?
No, this was just this week.
Okay, because like 5 or 6 years ago was when it was also completely in a scandal. The Justice Department had this case in front of them with these corporates. I believe it was McKesson Corporation.
McKesson definitely had one of them.
And they were
looking at CVS and Walgreens.
Found so many ways to skirt the law and deliver which was enough doses to like.
Plus, it was easier to pay the fine than to disrupt the income. That's what the distributors were discovering. They said, I can pay $50 million and still make $300 million and satisfy my responsibility as an ethical citizen. However, the point of this magazine is, so they say, they originally started reporting on this opioid crisis 30 years ago, which now takes us to the 80s. And I'm reading and I'm saying, this is a fabulous magazine. But curiously, as I was reading through it, all of the ads were for the Church of Scientology.
Wait a minute. What magazine are you?
It's called Freedom.
Oh, well, it's a new. You found it.
Yeah.
So
And it's not
basically-
new. It's been around for 30
so-
years.
But we've seen some things like that over the
Right.
years, right? Where various groups have a little front piece,
Right.
where they can get
Right.
the unsuspecting. I mean, I
Yeah.
think I love all of them, the
Right.
little wonderful cults of America. I don't say that. I'm not, I mean,
You
but
don't
I
know.
give them, you
Right.
know, I give them room. I mean, the
Right.
sweet Jehovah's Witnesses on the corner,
Right.
and will bring up topical issues,
Right.
and then have the, oh, by the way, here's
Right.
where you go,
Right. And see,
because we are unafraid to deal with the truth.
and nowhere in that did they say, here's where you go. Nowhere did
Oh,
they.
in the one you saw?
They did not
Oh, they don't like to
proselytize
do
the
that.
Church of Scientology.
Mhm.
L. Ron Hubbard had a big
Mm.
full-page ad back. He's dead now, but there was a big full. But what they kept pushing in the ads was Scientology TV, which I
Oh.
didn't even know they had a television
boy.
station.
Oh.
And but it was the only thing that disturbed me about reading the magazine. All the articles were fascinating, factual, and thoughtful. But I kept seeing Scientology. So what does that say about me? Do I not like the Church of Scientology? Well, actually, I don't think about them because I'm not subscribing to that belief. But yet they informed me in a manner that was good.
Well, all right. I mean, and you being the librarian and the scholar that you are, I'm going to have to think, okay, William knows that this is completely factual. There was not, if there was a left or a right bias,
No.
you didn't see it at all.
No, it was a bias against opioids and looking at the destruction in West Virginia and the old coal
and
mine industry.
and it went back. It tried to show the progression.
Right. It showed charts.
Because many people need to realize that this has been going on for so long, and a number of administrations prior to this one have completely dodged the confronting it.
Right.
Or
Some people say they ignored it because at those stages, which actually takes us back to men coming from Vietnam, because that's where we're going to really start to see some real uptick in hard drug use. Men coming back from Vietnam and the kind of depression and war anxiety and relief of pain, because some of them are injured, so those are pain relief medicines. So they say, well, people weren't paying much attention because it was in the Negro community. So limited population. Says, but that's not us. Well, now it's moved into mainstream
the
Caucasian community.
Heartland of America.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Where we see dying industry.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, some of those individuals are sufferers of injuries that they got while working in the coal mines. So that's how they started out.
Yeah, but
just
of
for pain
course,
relief.
and there's no doubt about that. But there's also no doubt that it's going on big time in the state of Maine,
everywhere.
out in the country of the countryside, Jefferson, California, for instance.
Right.
It's happening anywhere. Iowa.
And it's not
it's
limited
not about
socioeconomically.
Huh?
It's not limited socioeconomically. Rich people are suffering as well. They're doing not just as much, but they also are inhaling and shooting up their share of the drugs.
The whole thing obviously is not obviously.
Right.
Shut up. Everybody should know, of course, what I know.
You didn't know this?
No, but the people are. We've created this culture right now of spectator sport society, and your participation in terms of a feeling good or powerful about yourself or a vision of success. I mean, there's so much pressures on different ways that are undermining that for young people. I mean, I don't know, the whole notions of snorting powders or actually injecting, which is also going on all across the board now with, I guess, cheap heroines all over the place as well.
Right.
And it's like, why? What? Is this really fun, or is anybody?
Starts out maybe fun.
Huh?
It starts out maybe fun.
I don't
Maybe
know.
it starts out that way.
I guess so. I'm being maybe
Yeah.
too much of a Puritan there.
Right.
But I guess
Well, you are
I
a little
guess,
bit
I
of a
mean,
Puritan.
I have.
Right.
We all did that, and
Right.
maybe I still have my beer. Maybe I just settle
Right.
for that good IPA and think that I'm somehow, more
I'm above it
noble
all.
than somebody else who's
Right.
going to something a lot worse.
Right.
But again, it's about that
But it does
that
look in,
participation in
it
this.
does look into the darkness of people's souls. And maybe there is more and more of a detachment from the society that says we can help you and uplift you, and they're saying it hasn't been successful so far. 30 years later, I'm still seeing some of the same tragedies and inequities going on. So I no longer can depend on you. I have a certain dissatisfaction and distrust in you at this point.
And when you say you, you're referring to just the environment and everybody out there?
Everybody around you except for
Okay.
those who are close to you. And even then, you can't trust those who are close to you. I was talking with a homeless person, and I don't know what that really means, meaning that they weren't living in a residence that we understand. But they said they preferred sleeping outdoors because the confinement of indoors made them subject to many more perils. Because all of a sudden now you have people piling into a room that you don't really know. You're not sure of who they are or what they're going to do.
Oh, that's so basic to
Right.
the predicament of homeless people.
Right.
I mean, I have a very good friend out there on the street, that maybe you know Ernie, but I shouldn't be dropping his name.
Oh,
He's such a sweetheart
Right.
that I know that he wouldn't mind it, and probably someday I'll get him in here. But
Right.
he's like the ambassador of homelessness, and his thing is he calls himself home free. Not I'm not homeless, I'm home free.
Right.
And so many people who go through that process of even the overnight stay at a shelter where you need it. I
Right.
mean, God bless so many of them. I don't want to
Right.
take it away from any of it. Some of the church groups
No,
and all
no,
that stuff,
no, that's
particularly
perfect.
in the winter for survival. But there's different elements
Right.
that, from just the physical, actual, sometimes being surrounded with people who really aren't. Not all of them are the nicest people.
Right. Yeah, they're not all stable.
Yeah, and you're not. You don't necessarily feel particularly safe,
Right.
depending on the the
Right.
crowd that you might be with.
Right.
And then maybe there's just that spiritual thing, kind of thing, of like have to sign papers and have you been drinking, or
Right.
you have a drink, go
Right.
out, no, we don't want you.
You can't stay here.
Go back out into the cold. You were
But it was the first time I was ever confronted with the concept
Yeah.
of rejecting housing because I can't control my neighbors, which is really what that was about. I would prefer not to have the housing because I can't control who sleeps next to me or who comes into the building. I never even thought about it. Never crossed my mind.
But and that drops us back to a level of what I mentioned, Aldous Huxley and me looking for some kind of foundations of what you might sort of draw some sense of the world. But in his philosophy, and he was trying to say that there was an absolute relationship between overpopulation and over-organization, as he politely
Right.
put it, or AKA tyranny, is not so polite way of saying
Right.
over-organization.
Right, right.
And that we're in that zone where even the most benevolent attempts, let's say, of, and this is right here in the headline, but I don't even know, reviews mixed for Housing First plan. I mean,
Right.
a lot of California, Marin County, San Francisco,
Right.
people feel like oh, we've had enough. We're really going to do
Right.
it this time. We're really going to spend money. We're really going to provide the housing for the homeless.
Right.
And, you know, the details I haven't quite
Right.
figured out yet.
Right.
You know, what they're,
Well,
and you
remember
wish, you knock on wood, you hope.
You remember the mayor of San Francisco's rejection, and I think that's Measure C that's on the ballot to build more homeless housing. Steve Bezos, I think, is part of this from
Yeah.
Salesforce.
Right.
He's spending a great deal of capital saying, yes, we should build more housing. The mayor is saying, if you build more housing, I don't even have the workforce to control the spending of the money or the upkeep of the housing. So she's saying no on Measure C.
Well, this is the new mayor,
Yeah,
London Breed.
London Breed, right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm looking at that and I'm saying, wow, this is a pretty bizarre argument. But then the next thing they bring to you is, well, Bezos, who's for more housing, wants to make the city look great because he has his building there and his business is there. But they're also saying that the amount of money he spends for yes on Measure C is far less than his tax breaks. So he actually makes more in tax breaks, which makes him be able to afford to spend a huge sum of money, say, let's build more homeless housing, so it cleans up the streets of San Francisco and makes it more attractive. Now, I'm like, so is he just spending the money because he has so much money and he wants to spend it this way? I couldn't figure it out. See, so I didn't know if London Breed was bad and Steve Bezos was good, or is London Breed good and Steve Bezos is bad? London Breed says, I don't have the capacity to control the housing, which probably isn't the best thing to say. And Bezos can spend $30 million because his tax breaks inside the city of San Francisco are so great that he has the money to spend. It's weird.
Well, I think it is weird, and I think it's like, I think you're making, you know, like a very appropriate point in terms of, oh, is this good or is this bad?
Right.
Is this, I mean, almost every proposition that is presented to us
Right.
as the what choice? Educated voter or uneducated voter? Raise your hand. Which one are you? I mean,
the real trick is knowing when to say yes and when to say no.
well, not knowing the unintended consequences
Right.
of necessarily either direction. I suppose people can say, well, we better do something better than
Right.
doing nothing.
Right.
But sometimes that's almost like what we started talking about when we first got in here in terms
Right.
of what is maybe nothing actually is better than something if
Right. And maybe
you know.
sometimes, I mean, because when we started the conversation earlier, we were discussing should government start to react to a nimbleness that is being forced on us in the 21st century as a result of technology. You see, each and every day I can download 3 or 4 updates for my apps on my phone and on my computer. 3 or 4, you know. The app just got out last year. There's probably been 17 updates. Some of them security updates because they say there's breach of security. That should make you feel really uncomfortable, you know, right off the bat. But then I'd already addressed that issue once they could hack into Clinton's server. I figured there was no hope for me anyway. So when you're looking at it, you're saying to yourself, well, should government be nimble?
Well, that's what I was saying.
Should it be nimble? Should it just simply be considered and slow-paced? That doesn't mean disengagement, and it doesn't mean a lack of communication with the people who they're supposed to serve. It's just saying, in order for us to actually get the job done so we don't have to keep doing it over and over again, we should slow the pace of decision making. But that's a tough one to sell because everyone always tells you it's time to come out of the 20th century.
They tell me that. You're addressing me, aren't you?
I'm thinking
With
everyone. Everyone.
Well, all right, and I'm not sure. Well, what century are we? As we measure these centuries,
Right.
what are we supposed to? As if we're leaving something from the past. Now,
Right.
I don't mean to like hang on to the past,
Right.
and not lovingly embrace the realms of technological wisdom and,
Right.
and nimbleness, as you might describe it.
Right.
But I think the number one issue is too many people. I think we're kind of in a. I think
Right.
we're kind of in a mentally ill state right now.
Right.
And I don't mean necessarily mentally, because as soon
Right.
as I said that, I automatically thought about California.
Right.
And no offense to California,
right.
but yes, we are. I mean, every article, not every article. What's the number one thing that people complain about?
Right.
Traffic. It gets worse. It's sickening.
Right.
It's mentally ill.
Right.
And well, we just have to keep growing. I mean, we're building a state that's growing by still 300,000 a year, even though I think it's something like 200,000 a year are now
Right.
bailing out of California.
Right.
But they're replaced by happy comers from do whatever.
The numbers-
they got some money.
Right.
They're happy to come here. So we're still growing. And
But that's
is
true
there
of
like this?
everywhere.
There's something disconnect? To me, it's about. You just can't keep growing
Well, then-
more and more and more
It's
and
an
be
international-
improving the
Right.
quality of life.
Right. It's an international disconnection. Nairobi still seems to grow.
What?
Nairobi, Kenya.
Oh, they
still. That's an urban area that is
Right.
suffering.
Right.
Let's look at even Beijing.
Well, okay.
Another area that keeps growing and industry keeps packing in and
Okay.
pollution keeps coming.
Right.
So it's an international disconnect, not just simply a U.S. or California disconnect.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
But we are kind of like, we're poised. Supposedly, California is the place where all new things start, right?
Right,
And
right.
are new things just technology, or maybe is a new thing, maybe, if we knock on wood,
Right.
if it could be so, would be a whole new perspective about ecology and what our
Right.
relationship is, and whether we even have the power, maybe, to
Right.
to
And see,
say
I'm not so
we
sure-
could
Right.
that we don't have to keep growing. That we
Right.
could actually aim for a vision of we're 33 million or whatever we're at in California right now. We don't have to aim to be 50 million
Right.
by the 2050 or whatever. We can say,
And
you
we
know
need
what?
this much open space, and we only need this many houses, so therefore only this many families or individuals can move in order for the government also to keep pace with their responsibility for maintaining the public area.
The public welfare,
Right. You
maintaining the
see?
public welfare.
Right.
And it's actually, I think it's could actually come down to a simple, a legal, common sense declaration.
Right.
Now there was actually, I think that was one of the papers I pulled out of my pocket here.
There you go.
Oh, this is such a good paper, and it was it's some reprint from somebody's blog. It's called "Time to Dust Off California Water Law on Development Moratorium," and it was from
Okay.
somebody wrote this about, I think 5 or 8 or whatever, just when our drought that's already old
Right.
news
The one that.
was coming along.
Right.
But it was reminding people of this guy he was writing, Sean Sherlock, all right, and Catherine McKitterick. They refer to, right here in Marin County, this court decision by the California Supreme Court that said, in essence, that the water district
Right.
and the community and the government body that exists had a duty and a right to care for the needs of the existing community,
Right.
not some developer's potential dream,
Right.
and perhaps not even some rosy-colored thing of we have millions of people starving, therefore we've got to.
Right.
But you have to take care of the welfare of the existing community. And
So-
it was like the rule of law.
Right.
Well, they kind of,
So what is the comfort level? Because now what we've all done is we've been basically put in correctional facilities that are overcrowded. That is the nature of urbanization. We're all in it.
correctional facilities?
This is a correction, because we're now teaching people how to be and not be. It's correctional.
Oh, I
We're
see.
correcting their behavior by forcing us inside this context. It's hard to believe that that might be the basic outcome. I grew up in a world where I never had a key to my house. Could always, doors were unlocked.
I had a little bit of that.
You know, you could always come and go. You didn't really sit around worrying. But it was a neighborhood. And we weren't building new houses. I grew up on the desert. So plenty of space, but we weren't building more than the city could maintain and properly keep.
Right.
So now we're like growing and thinking we have to keep pace with this growth when, just as the article says, probably it's time for us to say, no, I can't do that.
Right.
You know, maybe we shouldn't let certain open spaces get populated just because the city does not have the capacity, even with the additional income, to really hire the employees or implement the technology that will allow us to maintain that level, that population level. Remember?
Well, and you know, just back to water
Right.
issues again. So we were in October, and we're about to begin our rainy season.
Right.
Well, we had 2 years ago, we had a fantastic water flow, but that was before
Right.
that. There was 5 years of drought
Right.
that put us all in a, you know,
Right.
on pins and needles. It could be a complete catastrophe there, and to some degree, I think there's still, well, not to some degree. It's true.
Right.
There's a huge deficit of water in California. Decisions, salmon,
Right.
farmers,
Right.
humans. Who wants to water your lawn? How about a twin tunnel
Right.
for the people of Southern California?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
watershed.
This is sort of like, I think actually, you know, I think most people are ready for a fresh perspective on the whole thing, and it shouldn't necessarily, to me, restrict freedom. I mean, freedom has to be, what is free? I mean,
Whatever you can pay for.
that you tell whenever you
You
pay,
can
for,
pay for it.
If you have the money, you can buy your
Right. Remember, that's how we restricted voters' rights. You had to have a certain amount of capital or assets in order to vote. So probably freedom is whatever you can pay for.
All right, but geez, so many good stuff. And yet, back in the day when it was voters were sometimes defined frequently in the early days of the colonies or of the revolution in those days, a community was defined by the people who owned land.
Right.
Not because they were the wealthy class, it's because there was land everywhere. And if you didn't own land,
Right.
then whose community were you part of?
Right.
So it made common sense almost. Yeah, everybody who's a member of this community, AKA owns land. Of course,
Right.
now nobody owns land.
Right.
So I mean, I shouldn't say
fewer
that. That's
of
not
us
true.
have.
That's completely untrue.
Right.
Yeah. But maybe that's just a technicality with
Right.
people dealing with the banks. Jump back to what you were starting. I think I was throwing you off because I think you were onto something really big in that notion that we're doing something. Get me back there again. What you were talking about, because it's like we're building this correctional system.
Right.
We are trying to correct morality or everything about people's lives.
We start talking about retrofitting. Well, the buildings were bad to begin with. Salesforce Tower was a bad building. The Transbay Terminal in San Francisco was bad construction. How did that happen? I mean, how do you not look back and see the Leaning Tower of Pisa and say, you know, maybe putting this building on this site may result in it being a leaning tower? Or how do you not have enough inspectors to go in and say, you know, these beams have been put in here wrong and they're already starting to crack?
I mean, it's
before you even complete
it's
the structure. So
how did this happen? What do you think? I mean, how long has it been since San Francisco has actually had, Lord forgive me, but Republicans,
Right.
honest to God, conservative, grumpy people running, you know, at least get their hands
Right.
in the thing
Right.
and saying you can't do, you know, like,
Right.
and instead we've got everything from the Bay Bridge
Right.
to that. I mean, do you want to be there when the earthquake hits on the Bay Bridge?
No.
I'd rather be anywhere
Right.
in the world.
No,
I could trust that, but it could be exciting.
Right.
But
right. Exactly. But you're right. How did we get here, and why is it that it's not just a Republican problem or a Democratic problem? Because it's about freedom, and freedom can be purchased. Still, that same point.
But it's pushed by this massive, like right now, for instance, the quote housing crisis and this drive to build more. Yeah, I guess money is a huge part of it, but it's kind of gathered a little momentum because compassion's now behind it. It's like,
Right.
we have a housing crisis.
Right.
You know, you don't need all these old-fashioned little environmental review laws that you know.
But are those reviews driven by the same thing that causes a man who says, I have such huge tax breaks, and it's financially important for me to have a city that is clean, to have a city that people will want to come to? Is it, that's that drive there. Really, if he didn't have his building there, I don't think he'd be concerned about the same thing.
Yeah. Well,
he wouldn't take it anywhere else. And that's the difference, because we always think, oh, California is IT capital. Well, you're old enough, I'm old enough to remember that Route 128 around Boston was the beginning of the IT industry, when it was all government funded and all the designs and technologies were designed for the government.
Wait a minute. All right, just review because I'm
Well,
naive and I forget that. I remember Polaroid, maybe Raytheon.
Oh,
I don't know.
No, Raytheon and all of the technology, the first internet interconnectivity.
But did the government?
Yes, because it was
foster
all
that?
it was all designed for them to launch big missiles, to communicate with one another, because we're now talking about international pressure on the rest of the world. We have people in Vietnam, we got people in Africa, we got people in India. We need for them all to be able to communicate. We got planes flying overhead. We have planes coming out from underground on the deserts. So around Route 128 outside of Boston, there was a design to assist in those developments.
So it was.
So it was for profit, but really non-profit, because the only people they were getting money from was the government. Now we're in California, and they're getting money from all of us. You see, so it's a different model. So that's why we all of a sudden think we're the IT capital of the world. But all the IT stuff we do is really for personal gain, more personal gain than what originally started out at Route 128, you know? I think you want to look at that and say, here's a model that's different.
No, that's, I get it. And it's, it all comes down, I just think that so much of the world's problems could be, I have a friend, you know, I mean, somebody wants to invest in what, Tesla or what your .com. Oh, never mind. I won't talk about it. Well, how would you encourage the world? I mean, why is there not, and I don't blame it on Republicans or fundamentalists who are out there railing against abortion, whatever like that. But still, we haven't got a message out to the world that it's all very serious,
Right.
and that we can help
Right.
too. That population birth control
Right.
is a value to everybody.
Right.
You know, you don't need to afford to try to deal with 5 kids or whatever.
What kind of help are you talking about?
Well, all right. So what
so
I'm trying.
we can help,
All right. So
or
I'm,
is
all right,
that not helping?
All right. Be careful with me.
Right.
Don't let me stray.
Right. We can help. Wrong.
Yeah. All right. All
Because
right.
everyone has some kind of remedy for
Yeah.
a problem.
True enough.
You know,
Yeah.
doctors dispute how
Yeah.
to treat
Yeah.
certain medical conditions all the
Right.
time.
Right.
You see, so we can help. Sometimes the help we may give is actually detrimental. It's sort of like when a crisis happens in a foreign country,
Right.
what's the first thing we want to send them? Water. What do we send it in? Plastic bottles. Have we really helped at that point? Because now we have this amalgam of plastic that's just going to go
Hideous.
into the environment, sink to the bottom of the ocean, and change the nature of things. All because we can help. Maybe we should just ship
Stop
water.
helping?
Well, or ship water in a different kind of container, or limit the amount of help that we possibly can give.
Got to think really wisely, and it's a challenge because so many things that are masked in help
Right.
do not help. There was some article, not article, and somebody's written. There's been books written
Right.
about all this activity of recycling clothing and sending it to Africa, for instance, or maybe
Right.
there's other places in the world, and how it's basically undermined or destroyed the actual textile industries of these communities.
Right.
And if you read about
Right.
the dangers of polyester clothing,
Right, right.
ah,
And
you
actually
know,
changed
it's-
the culture. We changed the culture because now textile industry, which may have been the very basis of that culture, being destroyed, and now they're looking at a culture that is alien to them. Like, what do I need to know about Nike if I'm not?
Well, they want to.
Right.
Maybe that's why. That's maybe why there's 50,000
Increasing
coming up across the
expectation.
Mediterranean
Right.
every year.
Right, right.
It's like, you're not going to keep me out of this party. I want it.
Now that
Just do it.
Now that you've told me there's a party, I'm crashing.
Yeah, and that's what's going on. I
Right.
think right now with the few thousand, 3,000 people coming up from Central America.
Right.
I mean, we want work.
Right.
And there was a Times article. The people they were quoting, and I'm sure that many of them are, you know, I mean, it's a nightmare down there of the murder and violence. But the people they were quoting is, "We want jobs. We want jobs. We
Right.
want work. I've sold my 2 acres in Guatemala, everything I own, because I want to get to America and I
Right.
want to work."
Right.
And it's like, oh God.
Because I don't have farming anymore. North American Free Trade
Well, that's a
took care of my farming. I don't have that anymore.
well, that's another huge part of it.
that's
because
I don't have that.
and you know what? There's an interesting part too, because it's sort of like a vicious circle. I just read this really great book about the wine industry that was
Okay.
written back in 2002, 2003 or 4, and so this reporter who was from the San Francisco Chronicle wrote this story, and he was going to follow the whole story of wine in a complete year, all the ramifications of how wine is done and everything. So he ended up even going back to the town in Mexico where most of the people who worked on this winery came from, checking in with that.
Right.
And he found that, this is 2003 or 4, that NAFTA's already been in place and that people didn't feel the need to plant corn or grow their own tortillas now,
Right.
or, you know, make
Right.
their own tortillas
Make
now
their- right.
because they could buy them, because they could get them. And it was too much work, and you know, it was hard work.
Right.
And I'm not saying necessarily that I think people should be sentenced to hard work when they can, after all, join Western civilization. And
Well, see, therein lies the rub. It's not that they've joined Western civilization. They've joined an amalgam of nonsense. It's not civilized.
yeah,
This is not civilized.
right.
You know, and Earlier I came in and I said, I think some institutions should be monolithic, intractable and indivisible, and that we adjust them slowly over time, just like we've worked with the U.S. Constitution. The document was put in place knowing the complexity of bringing colonies together. The document was put in place, and it knew that at some point, in order to achieve the ultimate goal, there's always got to be an avenue of inclusiveness. Always has to be an avenue of inclusiveness. And so it has survived as such, but it's monolithic. You can't just throw it away or revise it without a huge process of understanding and discussion and building trust and faith in the actual document. And see, that's what I mean by maybe it doesn't have to be nimble anymore. Maybe what we should be educating people about is ways of communication, ways of engaging with one another. Instead of the rush to a solution, perhaps it's the journey that's more important than the solution itself. Because if I sit and talk with you long enough, I probably could get along with a stable Republican.
I have a very bad habit of enjoying the strangest and the most wonderful people who are completely, sometimes, and I've already become kind of a Republican too, in my own progressive delusions.
Right. And that's not bad.
There's nothing I just sometimes think that, if we could find the level, it's that level of what we were talking about, of when you want to help, and what are we actually doing? And how do we get back to a place where maybe our culture or civilization can just more easily provide. And maybe that's about population a little bit, or looking at the big picture. I don't.
Maybe it is just the simple story of To Kill a Mockingbird. He's a helpful citizen. But then the decision to go and sit in front of the jail to protect the Negro is a very big and critical decision. It's not because he doesn't think it's the right thing to do. He's thinking about, well, I have children and I have stature, and how is all that going to impact me? And so I can't just jump in and do something. I have to think about it and try and figure out what are the multiplicity of ramifications, and how am I going to deal with that ramification should it occur. People say, well, you don't have to solve everything. Well, you're right. But I should anticipate as many things as possible. And that's where the slowness comes in. If I'm anticipating all of those things, then I have a backup, or at least I anticipated it and I know, okay, that's going to happen. Maybe I'll shut down the project and deal with that instead of trying to push the project forward, putting a Band-Aid on one ramification. So we got a bunch of Band-Aids going on. But see, that's the big decision in To Kill a Mockingbird. It wasn't because he didn't want to do the right thing. It was because if I do the right thing, what could happen? And is that right thing going to be good for the fellow who's in prison? All of a sudden, crowds storm the building because I'm sitting there on the porch. Whereas if I didn't go there, maybe nobody would even know he was there. Maybe they'd just ignore he was there, thinking that justice would prevail.
I don't think so, but that's okay. Interesting. My brain is trying to remember the movie and the book, which I've read.
I know,
both,
it's
and
one
I've
of those.
already
It's one of those where you kind of remember bits and pieces of everything. I mean, I always remember bits and pieces of a lot of things because a lot of things are coming at us all the time.
Let's take a pause right now. I think I don't think we've wrapped it up yet, but let me take a pause because I need to check the time here.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
There's a pause here.
But we should say it's always a pleasure to come and talk with you. The idea of being able to just have ranging discussions,
a riff,
right,
it's improvisation.
Right, we get to dice it up, and look at things in a different manner. This is not like regular television.
No, that's right.
We don't have a political agenda here.
No, and
seriously, we do not.
And anytime I think I do, which I think sometimes, oh, I'm part of some noble political agenda. It's like, please, stop me.
It couldn't be any further from the truth.
I know.
What you're here for.
But it is a little bit of, we're working on, I don't know. We're trying to discover what this world's about a little bit, I think, and that everybody's perspective or viewpoint. And to me, it's sort of like a test of my own courage or recklessness sometimes to express whatever thing that I know might be deemed outrageous, or I have to be, I have to.
I'm
I
sure
don't
there are
know.
going to be plenty of people out there who are going to listen to us. I say, I think those fellas are crazy. But I think there are going to be plenty of people who say, it's not so much that they're crazy, it's that they are perplexed. They really would like to figure out what it all means. What's the meaning of the universe? And then ultimately we're going to have to sit down and say, there is no meaning to the universe.
It happens. It happens so beautifully.
Right. This is the black hole.
Well, this is the magic realm of the color kittens going nuts and spilling all the buckets of paint together, and it's the most. It's almost you call it the black hole, but it's a very beautiful black hole if that's it. It's just full of color. It's just crazy.
Exactly.
It's magical.
Yeah, black holes can have color.
Yeah.
We just can't see it from outside.
I guess black holes are just temporary little, whatever they are. As far as I know, they're still far away from us.
And I don't think we're so critical of anyone or anything. I don't think we're trying to criticize. I mean, we talked about stuff, but it wasn't to criticize it. It was just to say, wow, isn't this interesting?
Right.
How does that work? Somebody wants to build housing for the homeless, and somebody's saying, I can't administer that kind of housing, and that's complex.
That gets back to like where we're at with democracy, because I think you were presenting this kind of, I was taking it as kind of a noble perspective on this. Did you use the term monolithic, or my brain
monolithic,
is of institution that we are a part of? We were born into this, and I think it's quite impressive, despite my lack of ability to, whatever.
Everyone's
deal
lack
with it.
of ability to deal. We're all struggling. You're not by yourself.
So, but the question is like how do we? And I guess maybe you've kind of pointed out some of the answers to the question of how do we deal with this confusion that democracy has become, where if you vote for, these propositions, I mean, vote for this, if you repeal the gas tax, then all that money that goes to improve roads isn't going to be available. And I was like, okay, you've been improving roads for a long time. Is anything... it's like, is that a plus?
Is them tearing up roads. They haven't improved them, but they're supposed to be on the way to improvement.
Always.
But all I see them doing is taking roads out, and we have a big mess.
They're horrible.
I'm looking at it like, some weeks I can't tell from week to week where my bus stop will be when I come in from the city.
There's always the next big idea. There's the next big idea ready to come along.
So we control population. We figure out what is actually a sustainable size for every community. In ancient times, death used to take care of most of that problem. Because if the community couldn't sustain you, you would die. And nobody would really cry about it. They'd feel bad, but they'd say, that's the nature of life. Trying to help everyone and save everyone maybe isn't the nature of life. And sometimes that's what I think we're always trying to do, or at least we're telling people what we're trying to do is save and help everyone, but
maybe that comes back to that sense of either you might say faith, but maybe you might say trust too, where can you put more power in people's hands if you tell them it's going to be up to you.
Right.
You know, I mean, I don't know. You know,
yes, you can.
yeah.
The answer to, in my opinion,
Yeah.
the answer to that question is yes. I think that getting as many people to be engaged and teaching them skills to communicate, and not necessarily to agree on every idea, but to learn to communicate, hear one another, and build trust, I think, yeah, that might be the best way to go. That is, yes, building up that kind of trust, that kind of understanding is probably the way to go. I mean, Martin Luther King must have faced the same thing, you know, and I was thinking about it earlier. So it's weird because we don't have that opportunity where we get to work on our spiel over and over again. But remember, it's Mahalia Jackson sitting in the background during the March on Washington and says, "Tell them about the dream, Martin. Tell them about the dream." And there's the "I have a dream" speech. But he'd been working on it in churches and communities as he had been traveling around. It was the concept.
And it was a concept that pulled everybody in.
Right.
It was a concept of, you know, I mean, it was, I was just reading some of it in the last couple of days again, this climactic thing of let freedom ring, you know, from, you know, everywhere, let freedom ring.
Exactly. So
and like, you know.
It's an interest. So we're in a place.
Yeah.
You know, you and I will not see maybe the 22nd century.
Don't think so.
Fingers crossed.
Oh, I'm not sure if I should cross my fingers for that. But, yeah.
Like I said, it's always a pleasure because it's not political. This is just discussion time.
I don't know. Maybe we're forging some politics of roundtable politics that if you call it politics, we can't banish the word, so there'll always be something called politics.
Right.
And maybe, you know, it's, I don't know.
So we're modern day knights. Roundtable politics, modern day knights.
Camelot? Whatever. Okay. Hey, fantastic show, William. All right.
Excellent. Appreciate it.